And put it right here.
Recording in progress.
All right, everybody. Thanks for being here. This is Miss Liz Allen. And she's right. We met in 2012.
10.
She was 10.
Yeah.
We've been to 12 years. I knew I was going to go to ASU when I met her. That's really true. We just connected. Yeah. I mean, she was the seller. I don't want to kind of toot my horn, but I picked the ASU over the Art Institute in Chicago. So, I mean, that's how important the relationship was to me when we her and Mark and Stephen came along later. He was so cool. So yeah, there you go. Yeah. Liz went to RIT to get her MFA. And she's the curator of Northlight Gallery at ASU. She also teaches. She teaches a gallery class. And she also teaches at the community college. She teaches darkroom and digital photography. As long as I've known her, she's been having a practice, an art practice through curating. But then the last 5 years, she started putting a lot more energy into her personal work, which became a really amazing body of work. And I know because she started in my dark room. And so I think you're going to get the opportunity to see this work and also learn what's going to give you a pretty strong portfolio. So with that, and I actually love this person. She knows that. And so I think you're really going to benefit from her talk and soak it all up. So Liz, can I just turn it over to you?
Absolutely.
I'm going to mute and ask everybody else too.
Okay. Well, I'm glad, Jane, that you started with talking about personal relationships, because in all parts of our life, whether that's academic, professional, community is a really significant part of our success, our ability to succeed and live the life we want to live. And in particular, when pursuing a master's degree, it's really important to feel like you're a part of a community of creative people, a place where you can be supported and challenged, and be required to think critically about your work, to analyze your own process, and to be challenged to step outside of your comfort zone, to try new things, particularly when you're in an academic setting, because that community of people really should accept your work in progress and be able to talk you through times when you're challenged, when you feel like you don't know which way to go with your creative practice. And it's so important to be part of a community that can support you through those difficult times. So it's wonderful when you just click with someone. And I think all of the faculty that I've worked with here at ASU talk about the give and take with students, that Bill Jenkins would always say this: he learns just as much from his students as they learn from him, and that the exchange of ideas, the questioning, the curiosity that happens within the academic setting is a vital force for the students and the faculty. So that being said, I want to make you aware of an organization called the Society for Photographic Education. Can everyone see that slide? I'm going to go ahead and let you guys see. Well, let's see. I can do this for now. So the Society for Photographic Education is an organization that I participated in graduate school when I was at Rochester Institute of Technology, and that was in the late 90s. And once I graduated and started teaching, I became even more involved. The second year I was here at ASU running Northlight Gallery, I worked with one of my colleagues at the community colleges, and we organized a regional conference for SPE. So that meant people from the nearby states would come together at one location in person every year in the fall and exchange ideas. People would present their artwork. They would talk about their teaching practice and pedagogy. There would be demonstrations of different photographic methods. And when we started to get more information about digital photography, this was a place where people could go to get training in digital technology, because not all of the faculty who were teaching at that time could actually take classes. So they used these conferences of the Society for Photographic Education to retrain themselves in digital technology. It's a wonderful organization. Jane was just talking about preparing a proposal to become a presenter at the next conference, which will be in Denver in 2023. So for those of you who are part of this region of the Southwest and West, that might be a good place for you to first experience SPE in the community there. I also want to make you aware of this online community called Wage for Work, and you can go to their website and look at more information. It talks about equity for artists, for as teaching artists, but also as professional artists who get exhibited in galleries and museums. And it gives a list of the recommended pay scale for artists dependent on if you're participating in a solo exhibition or a 2 or 3 person show or a large group exhibition. What is the equitable pay for that? Because as artists, we are providing the galleries and museums with content. Without the work from artists, there would be no content, no something for the patrons to come see at these galleries and museums. So artists should be equitably compensated for participation in that arena. So this is a slide of our website at the School of Art, Arizona State University's Northlight Gallery. We are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the gallery, which was started by Professor Emeritus Jack Stuhler and graduate students. And really, the gallery was initiated by graduate students. So in the early 70s, there were very few galleries in the Phoenix metro area that showed photography, and none that showed just fine art photography. So the graduate students had been trying to find places to exhibit their work, and they eventually talked Jack Stuhler into supporting them and finding a place on campus that could be specifically for fine art photography. And so on October 27th, 1972, they had their first reception, and Northlight Gallery was established. And so we've been celebrating that for the spring semester, even though technically we're not at the 50-year mark because it's not October 27th. But we will continue that celebration with exhibitions of faculty and alumni work. So let's see. So Jane talked about my creative practice, and I'm going to zoom down here a ways, because what initiated me going back to my own personal art making was the death of my cousin. And it was really difficult, heartbreaking. It was a sudden death, and my cousin Steph was a really pivotal person in our family, in the family dynamic. And so the grief of that death really pushed me to start making work again. And so what I did was I had been using bird imagery in my artwork previously, and I photographed using a 4x5 camera, photographed 4 different birds that I had in my collection, and I enlarged those images to create an installation. But what I did beyond making the photographs was I selected some silhouettes of birds in flight, and I copied those onto a nice parchment paper that would, when painted on, would get this nice kind of soft curve to the paper. And so I sent those stencil shapes to my family members all over the US and asked them to first paint the birds with black watercolor and then cut them out and then mail them back to me to be part of the installation. And the reason that I chose the blackbird as the symbol is that many other cultures have used the blackbird as a symbol of transition. And so I asked everyone to participate in that process. And it was really healing for us. It was something that we did all together. And I've been researching the way ritual helps us recover from trauma. So in addition, I wrote this poem in relation to that, kind of reflecting on a relationship that has been maybe difficult, but how that coming together can create a healing and a release from that burden. So I'll read you the poem. It's titled At the Peak of Flight. Is soaring so effortless as loving? It is the pause between our sorrows and loneliness when we are floating on the breath of God. The cessation of our beating wings, resting in a state of grace. The willingness to rise to the divinity of forgiveness and joy, accepting all, resisting nothing, weightless. So then these are installation views of that exhibition. In addition to the poem, the photographs of the birds, this one I referenced the symbol of yin and yang, you know, the kind of finding a balance between the dark and the light. And then the birds that my family members painted and cut out were installed as well. And along here you can see a row, can you guys see that, of birds that are kind of all at the same height and in a line. Those were installed by my 3-year-old niece. So she was very proud to help Auntie install the exhibition. So even the installation became community. These are printed 30 by 30 inches, and the frames are 32 by 32. You can see the reflection of the birds in the glass. This one was a barn owl, so this is the owl's wing, and then these teeth were actually baby teeth of my niece, whose mother had died, in the shape of the constellation Cassiopeia, And in the image, you can actually see lines between the teeth and the shape of the constellation. So let me go back to the top now. So that was the impetus for coming back to my own work. Oh, I think I missed this image of installation view of North Lake Gallery. That's our title wall, and the piece that the installation views that I just showed you, that was reinstalled for this exhibition, Memento Mori, Memento Vivere. So remember that you will die so that you remember to live, was the idea behind that title. And I co-curated this exhibition with actually another ASU alumna, Ashley Zukowski, and for the class that she teaches on death in your program. So some of you may have already taken that class with her. So that was the works I just showed you. One of those, the yin-yang image with some of the birds and the poem, were reinstalled for this exhibition. So the next project I went to after finishing that installation were portraits of my family members using the tintype process. And this is where the student became the teacher, because Jane was well practiced in the tintype process. So I did go to her darkroom to learn that process from her. So part of my experience with photographic collections is managing the research collection at the Image Permanence Institute when I was in graduate school at RIT. And we weren't concerned with the imagery of the photographs, we were concerned with the different processes. And the Image Permanence Institute does research for the photographic industry. It's a nonprofit at RIT. About conservation and preservation of photographs. So I was working with a lot of different photographic processes, and we were doing different experiments on them to test enclosures and archival materials. So this was a fairly typical tintype portrait with the oval opening, these two sitters. I purchased these from a local photographic collector, and I was just very interested in the way that the oval opening, presents the portrait. But those openings, that matting is often made of thin paper. So after 100 years, often the matting would get separated from the tintype. And so then in the photograph, you could see the backdrop that the photographer used. Here's a seaside scene, and he has how I interpret the father and son in their bathing attire. But that oval shape that would present the portrait of the two people is no longer there. So you actually get to see, you notice the artist's studio and the edge of the backdrop. Here's another one with these women with a scene painted in the background of, a wooded area. They even have leaves on the ground, and again, on the edge, without that oval that just presents the group of people, you get to see the edge of the backdrop. And so that really interested me, and I wanted to think about the way we present ourselves in a portrait, what we want people to see, and then maybe using this idea of being able to see around the backdrop as a way to think about as a metaphor for the life that people don't see. So I asked my family members to choose the location that best represents who they are in their life at that time. And so this is my nephew Miller, and he's in his bedroom, actually at my home. because my brother and his mom, my former sister-in-law, who's one of my dearest friends, had gotten separated and were getting divorced. And so my brother and his kids moved in with me. My sister-in-law moved in with our mom. And so this was a real time of transition for them. And Miller said, no, I want to be photographed in my bedroom. And I was very happy that he felt comfortable in my home, actually. And so I'm making these images with a digital camera initially, and then I'm printing them after I maybe touch them up, or I'll show you an example of an image that I actually composited with multiple digital files. Eventually, I'm outputting them as a transparency and then printing them through an enlargement process onto the tintype plates. So here's another one. This is Cinnamon, my sister-in-law's mom, and again with the backdrop, and then you can see around it. This was her little apartment, and she had an important Gandhi quote here in the background that she wanted to show. And then she also had put up these shawls that she wanted in her image. This is one of my nephews, actually technically he would be my second cousin. And I've since I created this presentation a couple of years ago, I've since titled the images a little bit different to show my relationship to each of these people. So now the longer title for this is Dylan at the Big Tree. It says his age, which I think at this point is 9, and it says my relationship to him through my immediate family. So it's my mother's youngest sister's older son's younger son. This is my niece Hannah, and this one, the longer title, is my father's sons, because actually her father is my half-brother. I think it just says my father's son's daughter, something like that. This is my sister, and so part of her title is just Jewel in front of her home, 2015, and it says my sister. And, you know, she was like, well, I want to be photographed in front of my house. And then I was like, what if we, you know, this is typical, the SUV, the kids playing in the driveway in their little Mini Cooper, the dog. This is my sister-in-law's adopted sister, and she wanted to be photographed with her big fish aquarium in the background and some family photos. My sister-in-law's father, he's a Starbucks enthusiast. My mom's youngest sister, and this is in front of Steph's apple tree. It's a memorial apple tree for my cousin who had died. This image is not a composite image, but I did control this. And initially, I thought when I made these portraits, I was not going to manipulate anything or touch up anything. And then I changed my mind after photographing my sister, because I realized that I wanted them to be portrayed the way I see them. And my sister had this big wrinkle right above her eyebrow, and I just thought it was so distracting in the image. So I went from being a real purist about not touching up the photograph to deciding that I would touch up the photograph so that the viewer would experience them more the way I experience them. And if you think about your close friends and family members, when you're having a conversation with them, you're not focusing on every little nitpicky thing on their face like you can when you freeze the image in a photograph. And so I made that change to my thinking. And this image, this was up in Chico, California, and it was a breezy day, and my aunt had this really long hair, and sometimes the effect would be wonderful like this, the wind or the breeze just lifting her hair up, and then other times it would just cover her face, and it was really frustrating because I couldn't control it. But it gave me the idea of having the breeze take her hair, so I actually pulled out a fan and put it directly on her and set it at a power that it would still interact with the breeze, but it would be just slightly overpowering it. And so then I got this image, which I was much happier with, and it was much easier than trying to, watch for the wind. This is her son, actually her oldest son, and this is more the way that I'm titling the images now. So Chad, age 43, my mother's youngest sister's older son. Because I want that family lineage to be apparent, and then the rest of the title is in front of his home with the dogs. Because the place where each person chose was significant to who they are in their life at that time. This is my mom's middle sister's grandson, and he's a competitive mountain biker, and so this was one of the tracks where he practices up in Flagstaff, Arizona. And so here I'm going to demonstrate how I combine the images. So here's the portrait digital file. So I might make up to 60 images, trying to get the right portrait, and I could never do that if I was making in-camera tintypes, which requires you to coat the japanned plate with the collodion, sensitize it in a silver bath, and then put it into the camera and expose it. And I was just I wanted more control than that. So I started out with this image, and this is where we're ending up. So then the second image was just this kid who was just really curious about what we were doing, and so I asked him if he wanted to be in the final picture, and so he rode through on the track a couple times so I could make a picture of him. And then here's my nephew doing a jump. Oh, there should be another one in there. Sorry, it must be out of order. Let me look here. Oh, here it is. Yeah, it's out of order. And so then this is, where I'm placing those two images. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with digital technology. And so then I take the composite, I output that to a color transparency, and then put in the enlarger and print with the tintype. And you might say, well, the color digital photograph looks great. Why aren't you using that? Because conceptually, I also wanted the tintype photograph, which I have been looking at in different collections since I was in undergraduate school and was at the University of Arizona and working at the Center for Creative Photography. And I was always amazed at the tintype process and how durable the plate is. So in thinking about, digital technology where we don't even necessarily print the image anymore, we can view them on our screens and our phone, and we have NFTs now, which actually was not in my mind when I made this decision to make these tintypes because they didn't exist yet. But I just wanted something that was durable, that I considered like a metaphor for the resilience of families as they recover from trauma and move through crises. And so that's why I chose the tintype process. So here's an image that's not the tintype, just a black and white version. This is my cousin's wife at the time with one of the dogs. You saw a picture of him earlier. Let's see. Okay, so here's some other images that will eventually be turned into tintypes and actually have been already, but I just hadn't rephotographed the plates yet. This is my half-brother's wife up in Messina, New York. My cousin's older son, Bryce. And this is my mom's younger sister and my cousin's younger son. And they were sitting on the edge of the creek here, the river in Chico, and I just moved them in a little bit. So actually, this is a composite image as well, because they were too far out to the side. So digitally, I just moved them in a bit. I just want to say something about the light in this photograph. The light in Chico, when I was there, was just gorgeous like this. A lot of the images I am using a flash, but this one I didn't. I just used a reflector, and it was just gorgeous, gorgeous light. This is my half-brother's stepfather at his home up in Messina, New York. My niece, who's now 11, at swim team practice. And this is also a composite. These guys were swimming back and forth in the pool, and then the image that I liked, which was, I said to her, these photographs are going to last for 100 years. How do you want to be remembered? And she put her hands up like that and said, "Arf!" So she wanted to be remembered like a puppy. Okay, that's fine. You're 6. So I thought that was very sweet. But I moved these guys from another picture and put them here because I wanted them in the background. And then there are outtakes, of course. This is my brother, and he has many bikes. He's an avid mountain biker. He's got many cars that he works on himself. And so after making the picture the way I wanted it, sitting in the chair, you know, letting me make image after image to try to get the right one, I let everybody kind of do silly things or what they wanted. Here's an image of my mom. I consider this an outtake also because she's not looking at the camera. I did another portrait of her. This is in our yoga studio in our home. And this is an installation view of the exhibition I had in March of this year. So it was a solo show, and as you can see, the tintypes are small. They're 4x6. Also, as a reference to something, which is the snapshot size of the photographs that I had when I was a kid. And so I'm wanting to create this dialogue between the 19th century portrait studio, 20th century snapshot photography, so that's why the images are 4x6, and then I'm using digital technology to make the original image. And I'm hoping that, well, people who know their photo history, I think they'll be able to put all that together and understand it. I hope that people who don't know their photo history just enjoy the images and the portraits and the story. So let's see, that might be the last one. Oh yeah, okay. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Are there any questions specifically about the work I showed before we continue? Because I do want to talk a little bit about preparing your work for a portfolio review, for an example, or if some of you did want to apply to graduate school, what might be needed for that. So does anyone have any comments or questions? Does anybody else have tintype images in their family album?
I'm going to echo.
We can't. It doesn't echo for me.
Oh, good. Mom just gave me those ones. Remember of my great-grandfather in his first pair of boots. 13. And then that one at the gym where it was on the necklace. And she gave me the cabinet card. Remember that had the photograph?
The gym.
That's the best one.
Yeah.
You know, that it's pretty meaningful to have them years later.
It is.
They're really beautiful.
I'm concerned with digital technology that we won't have that because we don't print them. And one of the things that we need to be aware of for our photography collections going forward is, you know, if I find a glass plate negative at a thrift store, I can still print that, right? I can just contact print it like you would a photogram. You can just put it in contact with the photo paper and expose it to light and make an image. But if someone buys this from a thrift store 50 years from now, it might just be a paperweight, basically, because you won't have the technology to get the images off this, because technology changes so quickly. And so one thing to be very aware of, to make sure that your photographic collection, your images that you're making as an artist, get updated with the technology. You have to keep on top of that. I have like zip drives that I can't get into anymore. And I know there's stuff on there, and I just go, well, okay, it's gone, you know. And you think of putting everything in the cloud. I mean, with all the cyber warfare that our countries are participating in, we don't know. So just make that something that you're aware of, to save your digital images, your digital files, and update them as technology progresses. Okay? Anyone else want to comment or have questions? Do you want a little more information about the tintype process? Because Jane is an expert. There's a wonderful...
She's an expert. She learned from me. She does them better. Well, at least those digital ones.
That's personality trait, though. So I do want to recommend Bostick and Sullivan if you are interested in doing historical processes. Dana there is a wonderful resource for information about these historical technologies, right? I mean, we don't kind of think of it, we wouldn't use maybe the term technology to describe these photographic processes in which you have to coat your own plate and then sensitize it so it's sensitive to light. And I do want to say, and I think this argument is dead finally, but there was huge arguments in the photographic community when digital technology came out. You know, which is better, digital or film? But you have to decide, one, what suits your personality. Do you enjoy sitting in front of a computer, or do you enjoy being in a dark room? Do you want to go to the great lengths of actually coating your own materials, whether that's wet plate collodion, platinum palladium, Van Dyke, cyanotype? And I think we need to think about our carbon footprint too when we think about the technology we're using, because this is a toxic process. Cyanotype is probably the least toxic because you can wash it out with water, but the wet plate collodion process, you have to wear a respirator with filters, and you change those out. If you start smelling the chemical, it's time to change your filters. But also, I mean, this creates a lot of waste. Updating our digital cameras create a lot of waste. Updating our computers create a lot of waste. So that I think that's something that artists are getting more and more sensitive to, and considering that in the photographic processes that they use. So, okay, that being said, I want to just go over some recommendations for preparing your work for, say, a portfolio review. And those are much more accessible, actually, in a lot of ways, just like your digital photography degree that you're doing right now. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm might sneeze here. Excuse me. So a lot of portfolio reviews are being done online at this point, and you do want to prepare. Ideally, you would have your website prepared, and also Instagram. That's a really common way that curators and photo editors look for photographers at this point. So ideally, you would want those two things prepared. As a curator for the last 23 years, I really use websites, not as much Instagram, because I'm often participating in conferences or portfolio reviews, so I meet artists through that, and I might research them more online through their website. But it's so important for me for artists to include a bio that tells you who they are and what their interests are. And a lot of people also include awards, grants, things like that they've received. But what's really meaningful to me, especially if this is on your website where you have as much space as you want, to give me a sense of who you are as a person, not just all those awards that you've gotten or grants that you've gotten or a residency you did here or there, but to give me a sense of what's important to you as an individual. And then an artist statement for every single body of work. So your bio can be more general, who you are, your interests, and then your awards, grants, things like that. But then the artist statements needs to be very specific to each body of work. That's very helpful. There are so many people producing amazing images in the world. And as a curator, I want to know that the way that I'm interpreting your work when I look at your website is the way you intend it to be interpreted. And the only way I can know that is if you have an artist statement that's specific to your body of work. So I'm going to read you my artist statement. And, when you're applying to things, they might give you a word count for your statement and your bio. This is 311 words. I had to write a 150-word statement for the Memento Mori, Memento Vivere show, and it was difficult, but I think I went over slightly. But you don't want to go over a lot, and if they're asking for that word count for a publication, you want to make sure you hit it. You don't want to go over because they might just edit it. So make sure you know if you need to be exacting and precise. So this is the statement for the body of work that I just showed you. The Family Lineage series is part of a larger project titled Fairy Tales and Other Lies My Mother Told Me. I asked each member to choose the location that best represents who they are in their life at that moment, and then photograph them in a style that references 19th century portrait photography. Historically, tintype portraits were presented in mats or cases that displayed the sitter in an oval shape and hid the edges of the backdrop. I've been working with large photography collections since undergraduate school, and the tintype process has always amazed me. The plate might be scratched, dented, bent, and separated from its mat, but the image is almost always recognizable. My creative process includes ritualized behavior in the making of each work that challenges me to confront personal issues of control, endurance, healing, and trust. I make the portraits digitally by combining multiple image files. The wet plate collodion process used in the printing of these images was invented by Frederick Scott Archer in 1851 and requires the hand pouring of each plate that then must be sensitized in silver nitrate and exposed before the plate dries. By combining the tintype printing process with digital technology to make these portraits, I reference the 19th century, 20th century, and 21st century collaboration. The durability of the plate is a metaphor for the resilience of my family members living with the effects of grief, mental illness, and addiction, while we transform the pain into a deeper connection with each other. In these portraits, I intentionally reveal what is behind the backdrop as a way to allude to the private story that everyone has. Trauma and resilience are part of that story, as well as love, support, and compassion. So, how many of you have written an artist statement already? You can show of hands. Okay, excellent. And so it's really helpful to have someone read it. I workshop in the course that I teach here at ASU. The students are required to collaborate in an exhibition, a group exhibition of their work, and they have to write artist statements. So they have to do 2 drafts, and then they have the final, and we workshop that in class. We share them with each other, we give feedback. I think, I've had artist statements for my own work that have just been poems. I just write a poem. I've had students who do something similarly, or kind of do a storytelling, create the artist statement like a story. And so I think it's okay to kind of put your own personality into your statement also. But again, I cannot stress enough how important it is for me as a curator. If you kind of cold call me, right, send me an email with a link, definitely include an image, because if I don't know you, I may not even click the link to your website if I don't see an image that I'm interested in. That's not really the way I recommend first interacting with a curator, but definitely you want to include an image if you send that first email. As far as interacting with curators, I would recommend participating in portfolio reviews. Again, the Society for Photographic Education, I know you guys probably are all over the country, maybe even all over the world with your program. Find your local chapter of SPE. The website for the national organization is spenational.org. And you can find your local chapter, and they have been having events online, portfolio reviews for the community all during COVID. And it is a really good way to get feedback about your work and find a supportive professional community that can carry you through beyond, your education, your academic degree. It is not just for photographic educators. It includes people who are curators, who are commercial photographers, professional photographers who are not teachers. And I couldn't say, enough wonderful things about the Society for Photographic Education. It is spenational.org. O-R-G. Thanks, Jane. Yeah. Anything else?
I was going to say the conferences are so much fun. Because you see people from all over. That's the first thing that you love and care about. And then you have this party thing that I never go to because it's too crowded for first. But I still feel like I'm going to. Yeah. And it's just the meetings and the talks are just great. And last one we used to remember right before COVID. It was Nadia, myself, Logan. Who's the person? It was in Houston. We went to this fast food place in the Galleria. And it was literally COVID was happening. It was March. But we weren't understand it yet.
And it was like March 6th.
They were talking about you. Whenever we remember what I said. I can't remember how I mispronounced it. But Corona. What was that calling it? Do you remember? It was something like.
I can't.
Well, I found it kind of terrible
about it.
Crazy name. And we just laughed and laughed for an hour. But it was fun. So it's great to see your friends, Sarah. I highly recommend it.
And I want to say during COVID, I have been participating in a group of photographers that met through SPE from all over the country that meet on Monday nights. And I was just, in conversation with them last Monday, and different people show up at different times. Sometimes we have a dozen people on the Zoom. Sometimes there's just 2 people on the Zoom. But these people are from all over our country, and it's just wonderful to have these conversations. People share work. They talk about projects that they're working on. I had a couple of friends get married during COVID, and then they opened their own gallery and art space in their hometown. And it was just amazing. We got to celebrate with them and encourage them. They brought the schematic of the plans, the way they were going to, install the dark room and all that stuff, and we gave them feedback about it. So it's a really wonderful community, and I encourage you all, if you're close to Denver in March and can make it to SPE, do that, or find your local chapter as close to you as possible and participate. Again, there's a lot of online things. We have, I think, 5 different caucuses at this point. So those are small communities of people who have specific interests or things in common. We have the Multicultural Caucus, which was actually started as the Black Caucus. And the first slide I showed you had something about Wendell White's work on there, and he was a founding member of the Black Caucus. And I'm showing his work at North Lake Gallery next spring. And then we have the Women's Caucus, the LGBTQ Caucus, High School Educators Caucus, and then we have a Contingent Faculty Caucus that really makes up a good portion of the members, because most people are not tenured faculty anymore. 70% of our courses in higher education are taught by contingent faculty. So those are people that have year-to-year contracts or just semester-to-semester contracts, often don't have any benefits with their position. They're working full-time, or part-time usually, or if they're full-time, again, their contract is renewed on an annual basis. So it's it can be a precarious life, and it's good to be informed of what the state of academia is at this point. And again, look up the Wage for Work website as well.
That's right. And they'll make a lot of friends, other students and stuff that are going through the same thing. And these people, I don't want to. I know we're going to close this, but Beckwith, Steve that's here. But I think Beckwith is an ASU alumni, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm curious. I'll have to ask Steve. Oh, there she is. Okay. Hey. Is that true, Beckwith?
There we go. Thanks, Jane. I'm not the ASU graduate. Gwen Davies is. And Gwen took over for Steve, my husband. We both taught the Odessa College photography program, and he retired after 37 years. I've been there for 25. And so when he retired, they went looking and they found Gwen, and she's fabulous. So
That is so wonderful to hear. She was a student of mine at
Yes,
ASU.
She mentioned and it's been delightful to know her.
Great. Yeah, and then she went to RIT.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. She has so many things in common with you. Now for me, are you getting for me a little bit? I was an adjunct all 25 years and still am. And if I was not married to Steve, I would not be doing this because I would have to do something else to make money and have a house and live in it. So it is nice to hear about the wage for, what was it called? Wage for work?
Yeah, wage for work.
And I've been teaching lots of different levels, and this is a great presentation that you did that I would like to share with the studio management group. So Gwen and I are redoing that class, and it's about how to manage your own studio if you're an artist, work for somebody else, work as for, you know, as a wedding photographer or a portrait photographer or a product photographer, architecture, any of that.
That is fantastic to hear. One of the things that happens at the SPE National Conference every year, and I'm assuming it will happen again, is the student volunteers who work at the conference to help it get going and make sure things happen when they're supposed to, get this really incredible benefit from one of our ASU alumna, Mary Virginia Swanson, and a good friend of hers, Susan K. Grant. They do this incredible workshop with the student volunteers before the conference starts. And it talks about, you know, professionalism, and it's a really incredible benefit. So if you do decide to go to the Denver conference, I encourage you to volunteer, get your membership as a student, and then participate in that workshop.
I agree. When I was there, when I did my graduate work at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, and when I went to an SPE, I gave a presentation, and so that was really dramatic. You know, high level of stress. I want to perform. I want to not sound stupid. I want to be cool, and I want to survive, basically. And the confidence level really skyrocketed after that.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place to, especially if you present as a graduate student first. The presentation times are shorter, so it's not as stressful, but it just gives you a sense of accomplishment. Or, you know, if you tank, you also get feedback. So it's still, especially as a graduate student, to go and present, I think is a really incredible opportunity that they're still making available to grad students.
Also, I mentioned something about your artist statement that you were talking about. In my intermediate class, I make them do artist statement, a small body of work, 3 images, same presentation, same kind of style, same kind of look, and do an artist statement to that. Steve and I had a joint show at the Abilene Contemporary Center, and with our floral cell phone work. And, you know, I'd done lots of artist statements, but this was the first one that was on the wall, bigger than me, bigger than us. I was just so enamored. It was great. It was absolutely fabulous. So thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you for that comment.
I think if there's a flaw in our program, it's that we don't spend enough time helping students figure out how they're going to use their photography degree other than in teaching. I mean, I actually do think that even though I'm fine art all the way, I know, and you know, there's ways to use fine art to work in activism or in different systems. And because a lot of times it has to do with the thinking as much as it does what we're producing. Because what we produce literally comes from how we're responding to what's around us. And so it's just like that Donna Walters. I mean, she's now going to be a student. And I think because this was a lady going to prison for life, but using photography to create a mitigating portrait, a portrait of mitigation that talked about circumstances, saved her life. And it was really visual language that did it, because nobody cared about what she was shouting out about. But once we used images, we literally used snapshots like Liz is talking about from the 60s, 70s, 80s. She was 62 and there was a record keeper in her family. But the snapshot, it was a 50-page document, and a lot of it had to do with family photographs, which were used as language to persuade the district attorney to look and read further deeper into the mitigation. And so I think that and I still use art all the time, not all the time, but I have cases consistently that art, even the fine art, what you learn in fine art school can be transferred, but we need to spend time talking about how that skill is useful, and in other ways, like that way. That was a way that lady now is going to be a student in ASU. It's like she went from going to prison for life to going to rehab for 3 years. It literally was a 3-year ordeal, and then just contacted me like, gosh, 6 months ago, and wanted a BFA in photography because she recognized how photography saved her life, and it did. It was just unbelievable. So those are things they don't teach in school, and I think that we should, because it's not really deviating from, educate theory in fine art versus commercial photography, that whole competition thing going on. But I do think we can integrate it into a way that can help people make a great living, or at least make a better living than teaching provides, like what Beth was saying. You can use our teaching as side jobs. Pretty difficult to survive on it, on being an adjunct or a contingency faculty, if you want to call it that. I call it adjunct because that to me is more representative of what it is. But it's the love of teaching that determines whether or not your teacher's any good, and I think, how much, because a good teacher gets over the money part somehow, or has a partnership, I think, or some other way to make money. And so, it'd be nice if we could integrate different ideas into classrooms to help students find their way when they get out, so that they don't give up their art making for another job, to survive. So, and Liz talking about those portfolios and going to SPE and making connections is what does that, because you start to understand, create a community that will help you in later when you're looking for a job and stuff. But I know I'm not echoing for some reason. I thought I was going to. So anyway, but we're running into overtime.
Go
ahead, Liz.
Do one more plug for another organization that I've found to be just wonderfully enriching. It's called Servas. I put it in the chat. Servas.org is the international organization. It was created after World War II to help promote global peace. and it's an organization for travelers and hosts. And the reason I thought about it, because you were talking about ways that people use art to help people. One of the people I met through this organization was a psychologist who was using photography with his clients who had experienced trauma, some of them who were living on the street and were homeless at the time. And it was just an incredible way for them to process what they'd experienced. I don't know if anybody is in this area, but Kids in Focus is another really wonderful organization that's local, started by a commercial photographer, and she works with kids who are often experiencing homelessness or in foster care to help them, again, process the kind of crisis-ridden life that they've been living, not with the intention of creating photographers out of them, but just giving them the camera as a tool to interact with their world. So both of those really wonderful, nonprofit organizations that I would recommend looking into. Oh, Jane, you are on mute.
Anything else? When you come down, we better go see Gwen Davis and see Stephen Beckwith, because they're only 90 miles down the road.
Okay, good.
Yeah, over there in Midland. Yeah. So we better do that. Because there's a nice artist community over there, and I've been trying to get myself over there. So that when Liz comes, that'll be a good excuse. All right, there's two students here to find. And Sergio, do you guys have anything you need to tell us before we hang up?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you, and I appreciate everything all you guys do. I'm a new parent of a 6-month-old daughter. I work full time. I'm a senior here on the program, and I love it. What was interesting is that my last class that I took, I was recommended by the professor to submit some of my work, either through competition or somewhere online. Never done anything like this, but it's really informative as far as what you've been speaking about portfolios, and so I most definitely will take that into account. So I appreciate that.
Okay, good. I'm going to recommend that you follow Mary Virginia Swanson on Instagram. Let me see what her Instagram account is. It might be MVS or MV Swanson.
I can put it in our Slack.
Okay.
Yeah. Unless Beckwith needs it, but I can always email it.
Okay, it's her full name without spaces. So I really encourage you to follow her on Instagram. She, because she is so much a part of the photography community, a lot of people send her calls for entry and they want her to post it on their Instagram. And she really does a good job of vetting the organizations that are putting out these calls for entry and weeding out the ones that are basically just using as a funding resource to fund their galleries. So she only posts ones that are, have meaningful content, and so you really should follow her on Instagram. She also posts beautiful images of her backyard in the desert in Tucson, Arizona.
Tucson? Did I pronounce your name right? I'll listen to Google.
Am I echoing as well?
No, not to me.
Okay. Yes, it's pronounced Tufan. Thank you so much for having this Zoom meeting and sharing your experiences with us. I really appreciate it. I thought your work was beautiful. It was awesome, although I am not familiar. I learned about it, but I'm not familiar with the process. But I enjoyed seeing them. And I had a question, but I did not want to interrupt. This is a question actually I asked before to another artist. in another Zoom meeting, but I would love to hear your answer to this as well. If you were to go back and start your career from the beginning, either for this project or for the whole, what would you have done differently, if there is anything? And what did you learn during the process of producing this beautiful art? I cannot hear.
Yeah, turn on.
Oh, okay. I was turning it off to hopefully help with the echo. I would never have stopped making my own personal work. That's what I would do differently. I really let the burden of making a living that we all have take me away from my personal art making. And although my curatorial practice, because my art making in graduate school was predominantly installation based, so I would create an experience for people to go into and enter. And so it was really easy for me to feel a lot of fulfillment being a curator, because I'm, using other artists' work to create that space. But I would have prioritized my own creative practice and never stopped making work. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's true, because we talked about that before.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's such a good artist. But what we've also said is to really validate that curatorial is another way to produce work. In the sense that even though you're putting something together with somebody else's, it's still your story that you're creating to give other people access to your ideas, basically. You're basically collaborating.
Yeah, you really are. As a curator, you're collaborating with the artists that you exhibit. And that's one of the reasons for me it's so important for someone to have their individual artist statements on their website, so I can make sure that I'm interpreting their work with authenticity, so I can exhibit it with integrity. The other thing I will say, Tufan, from your question is, I would highly recommend that you pursue mentors. Look for mentors in whatever area of your life that you need that guidance, and don't be shy about asking people to mentor you through a specific project, or just understanding maybe a new technology. And I have to say, Jane has been a mentor to me in that way with learning the historical processes. But that was something that I was really shy about. I'm an introverted person, and I have a difficulty demanding recognition for things that I have done and accomplished and contributed. So I would really encourage you to figure out how to toot your own horn. Ask for help when you need it, and sometimes even when you think you don't need it, and find good mentors. That doesn't mean that person is going to last, through your whole life or your whole creative practice, but make sure that you have mentors that can help you to achieve your goals and give you critical feedback.
Thank you. I am still looking for a mentor from the organizations and trying to reach out. I haven't heard anything back yet. And I used to be a very shy person, but for another class, Arts 206, if I'm not mistaken, my final work was as a street photographer. Being out on the street for 3-4 days did it for me. I'm not shy anymore. I can get out there and ask any help that I need. Indeed, yesterday I was driving and I saw this very old gentleman holding a sign saying that he's hungry. I turned back, stopped the car, got to him. I said, "Sir, here's the food I picked up from the church. I tried to volunteer earlier. This is all yours, but may I please take your photograph?" And he let me, and I'm gonna actually share it within my 5 photographs that I'll share in Slack. So it'll be there. And he actually said that his wife was a graduate from ASU. I was so surprised.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, we have a wonderful professor here, Stephen Mark, who's just amazing at street photography. I'll be exhibiting his work, American True Colors, in the fall. He got a Guggenheim. He was awarded a Guggenheim last year, I think 2021. But he just has an incredible rapport, and I wish you could come and take a class with him in person, to be out on the street with him.
I would love to, but I live in San Diego.
Yeah.
I'm surprised getting to talk, but it's hard because he doesn't like email. Calling on his phone. You know, so
yeah.
But it would he'd be a great speaker. He's got a lot of energy. We love him.
Yeah.
He's got a big heart. Yeah, and he's an activist through and through. Y'all see some of his work on our class. All right, we've gone over, but it's been a beautiful talk. You know how much I care about you. You did such a good job. Thank you.
I really appreciate you all showing up, so I'm not just looking at Jane's face.
She might be.
It makes me feel like you're interested and that this was worthwhile. So I really appreciate that.
It was worthwhile. Yes. All right. Everybody, thank you for being here. Please feel free to come and speak. And I'll put the link on the photography professors. And then, of course, our classroom has it already in there. All right. See you guys. Take care. Bye.